Sometimes the biggest turning points in life arrive broken, bleeding, and asking for help. The October wind had that sharp, cutting edge that only Montana could deliver. The kind that carried the scent of harvest and loneliness in equal measure. It swept through the open fields, rattling the tall stalks of wheat as if whispering secrets from a world that moved on without me. I stood there, hands on my hips, watching Lily and Rose chase each other through the golden sea of stalks, their laughter ringing across the fields like the sound of a promise I was never quite sure I deserved. Lily's pigtails bounced with every step, her energy boundless, while Rose lingered behind, distracted by every rock, every flower, every tiny piece of the world that captured her curiosity. I smiled, tightening the worn leather strap of my cap against the wind, letting their laughter sink deep into me like sunlight warming frozen soil. At 34, I had already lived more lives than most men ever wanted to. I was a father, a rancher, a man learning to rebuild something broken from the dust. My wife, Sarah, had left when the twins were barely old enough to know her name. She said she couldn't handle the isolation, the endless cycle of feeding horses, fixing fences, and praying for rain that never came when we needed it most. She had wanted city lights and silk dresses, not muddy boots and cracked hands. So she left. I didn't chase her. Some storms you just stand through, even when they take the roof off your world. The Morrison Ranch had been my salvation, and my sentence all at once. 4 generations had built this land with grit and blisters, and I refused to be the one who let it die. I woke before dawn every morning, fed the horses, tended the cattle, and fixed whatever had broken overnight, which was usually something. I did it all for those 2 little girls who were the last good thing Sarah ever gave me. They were my reason to keep breathing, my anchor when life tried to pull me under. That morning had started like any other. Breakfast dishes stacked in the sink, coffee steaming in a chipped mug, the girls playing outside while I checked the fence line that bordered Highway 89. The sky was a bruised kind of blue, low clouds rolling over the horizon, whispering of an early winter. Everything felt steady, predictable, safe, until it wasn't. It was Lily who noticed first, her small voice slicing through the wind. "Daddy, there's something by the fence." I followed her gaze, my stomach tightening as I saw what looked like a dark shape slumped against the far post of the wooden fence. At first I thought maybe an animal had wandered too close to the road and been hit, but as I got closer, the shape shifted, and my heart stumbled. It wasn't an animal. It was a woman. Her clothes, or what was left of them, were torn and streaked with dirt. A line of blood trailed down from a cut above her eyebrow, mingling with the dust on her cheek. She was sitting awkwardly, her back pressed against the weathered fence, one arm hanging limp at her side. 20 yards beyond her, an expensive silver SUV lay crumpled in the ditch, steam hissing from its shattered hood. The smell of burned oil and antifreeze filled the air. "Stay back, girls," I ordered, sharper than I meant to. I could hear the tremor in my own voice. My boots crunched against the gravel as I approached, my heartbeat loud in my ears. Her eyes fluttered open as I knelt beside her. They were green, not just green, but sharp, vivid, the kind of green that catches the light and holds it. "Ma'am," I said, trying to keep my tone steady, "you're hurt. I'm Jack Morrison. This is my land." She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. I caught her before she fell. "I'm fine," she murmured, the lie trembling in her voice. "I just need a minute." "Fine doesn't usually bleed like that," I said, pulling the bandana from my pocket and pressing it gently against her forehead. "We need to get you to a hospital." "No." The word came out sharp, panicked. Her fingers gripped my sleeve with surprising strength. "No hospitals, no police. Please." I hesitated, glancing back at the twins. They were watching, wide-eyed, clutching each other's hands near the gate. Everything about this woman screamed trouble, from the wrecked luxury car to the fear in her eyes. But beneath the fear was something else, something that made me pause. Desperation. "My name's Emma," she said, her breath shallow. "Emma Sterling." The name hit me like a jolt of cold water. Everyone in Montana knew the Sterlings. Old money, oil money, the kind that built empires and made headlines. But the woman slumped against my fence didn't look like the face of a fortune. She looked human, frightened, breakable. "What happened?" I asked, scanning the highway for any sign of another car. Nothing. Just open road and silence. "My car." She glanced toward the wreck. "Something ran out in front of me. I swerved and... I don't know." She swallowed hard. "Please, I just need somewhere safe to think." There was a tremor in her voice that didn't sound like pain. It sounded like fear of something much larger than a car accident. "Daddy, is the lady okay?" Lily called, her small voice full of concern. Emma turned her head toward the girls, and for a split second, the fear melted away. "Hello there, beautiful girls," she said softly, her voice taking on a warmth that caught me off guard. "What are your names?" "I'm Lily," said one proudly. "That's Rose. We're 6. Rose stepped forward, holding out a smooth riverstone she'd picked up earlier. "This is lucky," she said, offering it with both hands. "You can have it so you feel better." Emma's lips trembled as she took it. "Thank you," she whispered, blinking back tears. "That's the kindest thing anyone's done for me in a long time." I felt something tighten in my chest, a mix of worry, curiosity, and something deeper I couldn't name. I had learned a long time ago that life doesn't hand you strangers in the middle of nowhere, without a reason. And this woman's reason was written all over her trembling hands and guarded eyes. "The farmhouse is just over that hill," I said finally. "You can clean up, and we'll figure out what to do next." She looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing whether she could trust me. Then she nodded once, slowly. I slipped her arm over my shoulder and helped her to her feet. She winced, but didn't protest. As we started the slow walk toward the farmhouse, the twins trailed behind, whispering questions I wasn't ready to answer. The wind picked up again, carrying with it the faint scent of rain and something else. Change. The kind of change that doesn't ask for permission before it walks straight through your door. By the time we reached the porch, the sun was low, casting long shadows across the yard. I guided her up the steps carefully, my hand firm around her waist to keep her steady. The wood creaked beneath our feet, the same way it always had. But that day it sounded different, like the house itself knew something had shifted. She paused at the doorway, eyes scanning the simple home that had been my whole world since Sarah left. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't much. But it was ours. Family photos lined the walls, hand-sewn curtains fluttered in the breeze, and the smell of coffee and fresh bread lingered in the air. For a brief second, I saw something flicker in her expression. Longing, maybe even envy. "You can sit here," I said, pulling out a chair at the kitchen table. "I'll get the first aid kit." She nodded, her gaze drifting to the photographs on the wall. Me and the girls at the county fair, the 3 of us building a snowman, covered in more snow than the snowman itself. "Beautiful family," she murmured. "They're my whole world," I said, setting the kit on the table. "Where's yours?" A silence stretched between us. She looked down at her hands, her jaw tightening. "Family isn't an option right now." I cleaned the cut on her forehead, the way my father had taught me to. Firm, careful, without asking questions. She didn't flinch, but I could feel her pulse racing beneath my fingers. When I finished, she met my eyes. "You didn't have to help me." "Maybe not," I said quietly, "but I couldn't just leave you there." Outside, the wind howled across the open plains, rattling the windows like a warning. I didn't know who Emma Sterling really was, or what she was running from, but I could feel it in my bones. She was trouble. The kind that comes with secrets too big to hide and consequences too heavy to carry alone. And yet, as I looked at her, this broken, frightened stranger sitting in my kitchen, knew I wasn't about to turn her away. As I lifted her into my truck, I had no idea that one decision would change all our lives forever. She looked out of place in my kitchen, like silk caught in a storm. The screen door creaked behind us as I helped Emma step into the farmhouse. The scent of rain-soaked earth and coffee drifted through the air, mixing with the warmth of home that had always wrapped around this place like a familiar embrace. Lily and Rose darted ahead, their little boots thudding against the wooden floor, their excitement bubbling over as they peeked curiously at the stranger limping behind me. I could feel Emma's hesitation at the threshold, as if she were afraid to disturb something too pure for the world she came from. The farmhouse wasn't much to look at, not compared to the polished luxury I imagined Emma Sterling was used to. The walls were painted the soft cream my mother had chosen years ago, the kind that aged with grace. The kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon and firewood, the afternoon light slanting through checkered curtains sewn by my grandmother's hands. The dining table was scarred from years of meals and memories, knife marks from cutting bread, scratches from toy trucks, a burn ring from a night I'd fallen asleep with coffee I never drank. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and that was something money could never buy. Emma's gaze lingered on the details. The framed photo of me holding the twins at the county fair, their faces smeared with cotton candy, the old quilt folded neatly on the couch, the horseshoes nailed to the entryway wall for luck. She didn't say a word, but her expression softened, the sharpness of her fear blurring into something more fragile. "Sit down," I told her gently, pulling out a chair. "You're safe here." Her eyes darted toward the window, as if expecting flashing lights or black SUVs to come roaring up the driveway. "I'm sorry for intruding," she said, her voice low, careful. "I didn't mean to—" She trailed off, her throat working like she was swallowing down the rest of her words. "You didn't intrude," I said, setting the first aid kit on the table. "You're hurt. That's all that matters right now." She nodded, her fingers gripping the edge of the table like it was the only solid thing left in her world. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her body was coiled tight, ready to run. It wasn't just the pain from her injuries. It was something deeper, something she was fighting to keep hidden. Lily appeared at her side holding a cup of milk, her face full of solemn purpose. "Here," she said. "It helps when you don't feel good." Emma blinked, startled, before taking the cup with both hands. "Thank you," she said softly. "You're very kind." "That's what Daddy says we should be," Lily replied, matter-of-factly. "Kind and brave." "Wise advice," Emma murmured, her lips twitching into the faintest smile. Rose climbed onto the chair beside her, plunking down a worn teddy bear with one missing button eye. "This is Mr. Buttons," she said seriously. "He helps when you're sad." I watched Emma's hand tremble slightly as she accepted the bear, holding it like something sacred. "He's perfect," she whispered, her voice breaking just enough to tell me that whatever she was running from, it had been a long time since anyone had shown her such simple goodness. I cleaned the cut on her forehead while she stared at the photos on the wall. She didn't flinch when the antiseptic stung. She just stared, her eyes tracing each frame as if memorizing the story of a life she'd forgotten how to live. "They're beautiful girls," she said finally. "Yeah," I said, a quiet pride threading through the word. "They're my whole reason." She hesitated, then asked softly, "And their mother?" "She left when they were babies." I didn't look up as I said it. Said this kind of life wasn't what she wanted. "I'm sorry," she murmured. I shrugged, though it wasn't as easy as that. We manage. They make it easy. When I finally met her eyes again, something flickered there. Not pity, not even sympathy, but understanding. The kind that comes from knowing what it means to lose something you thought would last forever. The twins had wandered into the living room by then, their laughter echoing faintly as they argued about which storybook to read before dinner. I took the chance to study Emma more closely. Even with dirt smudged across her face, and a bruise darkening along her jaw. She carried herself like someone who wasn't used to breaking. Her posture, her diction, even the faint perfume of something expensive clinging to her. Everything about her said refinement and control. But those eyes told another story entirely. Fear, fatigue, a kind of heartbreak that didn't come from one bad day, but from years of running. "You should let me drive you into town," I said. "Get that arm checked. Maybe stay at a motel while you figure things out. No hospitals, no police." The words came out too quickly, too sharp to be casual. "Emma?" I said slowly, her name unfamiliar on my tongue. "If you're in some kind of trouble?" "I just need somewhere safe," she cut in. "Please." Her tone wasn't commanding. It was pleading. Whatever pride she once had was buried under layers of fear. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "You can stay the night," I said finally. "We'll figure things out in the morning." She exhaled shakily. And for the first time since I'd found her, her body seemed to relax just a little. While I cooked dinner, she sat quietly at the table, watching as I moved around the kitchen. I could feel her eyes on me, studying everything. The way I flipped the sandwiches, the way the girls set the table without being told, the way we laughed when Rose spilled the juice and Lily raced to clean it up. I realized then that she wasn't just watching. She was remembering what family looked like. After dinner, the twins insisted she stay to play a round of their favorite card game before bedtime. She tried to decline, but they wouldn't take no for an answer. Within minutes, laughter filled the kitchen again. Emma's smile came easier this time, her guard slowly lowering with every silly joke and every tiny hand tugging at hers. When the girls finally went upstairs to bed, she sat back in her chair and looked around the room. "You have a good life here," she said quietly. "Good days and bad ones," I admitted. "Mostly good when they're laughing." Her gaze dropped to her lap. "It's been a long time since I laughed like that. Maybe you should try it more often," I said, and she looked up at me with a faint, wistful smile. For a long moment we sat there in silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving behind that clean, earthy smell that only comes after a storm. I poured her a cup of coffee, and she accepted it with both hands, her fingers brushing mine for the briefest second. "Thank you," she said softly, "for helping me, for all of this." Anyone would have done the same. She shook her head. Not everyone would have opened their door to a stranger who shows up bleeding by the roadside. "Maybe not," I admitted, "but my girls were watching. I try to show them the kind of person I want them to be." That earned me another small, genuine smile, and something about it twisted in my chest, because I realized I didn't want her to leave. Not yet. Still, the unease lingered beneath the warmth of the moment. Every so often I caught her glancing towards the window, her jaw tightening at the faint sound of a car passing on the highway. Her eyes carried the weight of someone who'd been looking over her shoulder for far too long. When I walked her to the guest room later, she paused at the doorway. "I'll only stay until morning," she said, as if trying to convince herself as much as me. "Whatever you need," I replied. "You're safe here." She hesitated, her hand on the doorframe, her voice barely above a whisper. "I hope that's true." As she stepped into the room and the light flicked off, I stood alone in the hallway for a long moment, listening to the quiet creak of the old house settling. For the first time in years, she felt safe, but safety was the one thing she couldn't afford. I thought peace was a stranger to me, until 2 6-year-olds taught me how it feels. Evening came softly that night, settling over the Montana plains like a worn quilt. The air outside had turned crisp, the wind carrying the faint hum of crickets and the scent of wood smoke drifting from the fireplace Jack had lit earlier. Inside the Morrison farmhouse, light spilled from the kitchen in warm, golden patches that glowed against the darkening windows. The storm that had been gathering all afternoon finally broke. A low rumble of thunder rolling through the valley, rain tapping gently against the glass, like the rhythm of an old lullaby. I sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in one of Jack's flannel shirts that hung loosely over my shoulders, and watched as he moved between the stove and counter with the easy confidence of a man who'd spent years caring for others. His daughters, Lily and Rose, were perched on wooden stools beside him, handing him slices of bread, passing the butter, giggling at their own private jokes. It was so simple, so ordinary, and yet I couldn't remember the last time I had witnessed something so quietly beautiful. Jack caught me watching and smiled. That kind of easy, genuine smile that came from someone who didn't know how to be anything but real. "Hope you're hungry," he said, flipping a grilled cheese sandwich onto a plate. "The girls claim I make the best in Montana, but they might be a little biased." "Biased, but right," Lily said with the authority only a 6-year-old could summon. "Daddy's grilled cheese fixes everything," Rose added solemnly. I laughed, the sound surprising me. It felt strange, that lightness, almost foreign after so many days spent drowning in tension and fear. "Well then," I said, "I'm honored to experience the famous Morrison family recipe." Dinner was humble: sandwiches, tomato soup, and a pitcher of lemonade, but the laughter and conversation made it feel like a feast. The girls chattered endlessly, their stories tumbling over each other's words as they told me about their adventures on the ranch, the time they tried to teach a calf to fetch, or how Lily once painted a horse's tail pink because she thought it looked too plain. Every tale came with wide-eyed sincerity and contagious laughter that filled the kitchen like sunlight. For a while, I forgot to be afraid. I found myself studying their faces, identical freckles, but distinct personalities. Lily was bold, certain of her opinions, while Rose was thoughtful, her eyes always searching the world for hidden meaning. They were mirrors of the best kind of childhood, wild, trusting, and loved beyond measure. At one point, Rose leaned across the table and whispered to me, "Do you like it here?" I blinked, caught off guard by the question. "I do," I said truthfully. "It's peaceful." She nodded with the serious expression of someone far older than 6. "Daddy says peace is something you build every day, like a fence. If you stop working on it, it falls apart." Her words hit deeper than she could have imagined. Out of the mouths of children, sometimes the truest things are said. After dinner, Jack cleared the dishes while the girls insisted on showing me their drawings posted on the refrigerator. There were crayon sketches of horses, stick figures holding hands, and one lopsided heart with "Me plus Daddy plus Rosie" written in shaky letters. I traced the lines of that heart with my fingertip, the simplicity of it tugging at something inside me I hadn't felt in years. Longing. "You've done a beautiful job raising them," I said quietly, as Jack stacked the dishes in the sink. He shrugged, drying his hands with a towel. "I do my best. Some days are harder than others. Some nights when they're asleep, I still wonder if I'm enough." "You are," I said without thinking. He looked at me, really looked at me, and for a moment the air between us felt different, heavier, charged. His eyes were steady, the color of weathered wood, the kind that held warmth even when life got cold. "I appreciate that," he said finally, his voice softer now. "It means more than you know." Thunder boomed outside, shaking the window panes. The girls squealed, delighted instead of frightened, and ran to press their noses against the glass. "I love storms," Lily cried. "They make everything feel cozy." I watched them, their silhouettes framed by lightning that flashed across the sky, and something in my chest ached. This was what safety looked like. This was what love felt like. It wasn't grand gestures or expensive gifts. It was grilled cheese and bedtime giggles, and a man making sure the world stayed gentle for 2 little girls who believed it still could be. When they finally grew tired, Jack herded them towards the stairs. "Go brush your teeth and I'll come tuck you in." "Can Miss Emma read us a story?" Rose asked hopefully. Jack glanced at me. "If she's up for it." "I'd love to," I said. The girls' faces lit up, and a few minutes later I was sitting on the edge of their bed, reading from a tattered storybook about a brave horse that could fly. They nestled against each other, eyes half closed, smiles soft as they drifted toward sleep. I felt something inside me settle, a stillness I hadn't known I was capable of. When I stepped out of their room, Jack was leaning against the hallway wall, watching me. "They already adore you," he said quietly. "They're easy to adore," I replied. We walked back to the kitchen together, the house dim except for the glow of the fireplace. The storm had settled into a steady rhythm outside, the sound of rain against the roof like a heartbeat. Jack poured 2 cups of coffee and handed me one. "It's been a while since we've had company," he said, staring into his mug. "Most people don't make it this far off the highway unless they're lost." "Maybe I was," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "In more ways than one." He looked up, meeting my gaze. "Then maybe this is where you find what you didn't know you were looking for." The words hung there, heavy and unspoken, the air between us thick with something that felt too fragile to name. I looked away, first afraid of what I might see in his eyes, or worse, what he might see in mine. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The crackle of the fire filled the silence. I reached into my jacket pocket, instinctively searching for my phone, my lifeline, my secret, and froze when I remembered it was broken, lying in the wreck of my car down the road. But then I remembered the second one, the backup, hidden deep in my bag upstairs. My pulse quickened just thinking about it. That phone was my connection to everything I'd been running from, the people who wanted to find me, the ones who wouldn't stop until they did. I'd planned to check it tonight, to see if anyone had called or if the danger had moved closer. But now, in this house that smelled of soup and rain and innocence, the thought of pulling that device from my bag felt like unleashing a storm inside something fragile and pure. So I didn't. I left it buried. I let the quiet win. Jack stood and walked to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. "Storm's supposed to last all night," he said. "You'll be safe here." "I believe you," I said, and meant it. He turned toward me, his expression unreadable in the firelight. "You don't strike me as someone who trusts easily." "I don't," I admitted, "but tonight I think I want to." He smiled, slow and sincere. "Then that's a start." Something shifted then. Not a grand moment, not a cinematic spark, just the quiet understanding between 2 people who'd both been broken in different ways, but still managed to recognize a piece of themselves in each other. The storm outside deepened, lightning flashing across the plains, illuminating the room for a heartbeat before fading again into the steady dark. I sipped my coffee, listening to the rain, feeling the weight of a peace I hadn't earned but desperately wanted to hold on to. As I sat there, surrounded by the faint hum of life inside that small farmhouse, I realized how long it had been since I'd simply existed in a moment without fear clawing at the edges. And that scared me more than anything. Because peace, I knew, was a dangerous thing. It made you forget why you built your walls in the first place. Even as laughter filled the house, my heart whispered a warning. Peace never lasts. It was the kind of morning that makes you believe life could start over, until reality knocked again. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed was the sound. Soft laughter drifting from downstairs, the kind that only belonged to children. It was light, bubbling, pure in a way the world rarely allowed anymore. For a moment, lying there beneath the quilt that smelled faintly of cedar and sun-dried linen, I forgot who I was. I forgot the endless boardrooms, the sleepless nights, the headlines that had once carried my name in gold letters before they started printing it in whispers. For the first time in what felt like years, my heart wasn't racing. The morning light spilled through the window in pale ribbons, painting golden patterns across the wooden floorboards. I sat up slowly, muscles aching, head still heavy from exhaustion, and pulled on the flannel shirt Jack had lent me the night before. It hung loosely on me, the sleeves rolled up past my elbows. I caught my reflection in the mirror. No makeup, hair pulled back messily, a faint bruise shadowing my temple. I looked human. Not the perfectly composed version of Emma Sterling that had smiled through interviews and charity galas. Just a woman trying to breathe. When I walked into the kitchen, the smell of coffee and pancakes greeted me like an embrace. The girls sat at the table, syrup smeared on their cheeks, arguing over who got the bigger piece. Jack stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with the kind of focus that made it seem like the fate of the world depended on getting them just right. He looked up when he heard my footsteps. "Morning," he said with that easy smile that made the air in the room feel warmer. "Hope you slept okay." "I did," I admitted, surprised by the truth of it. "I can't remember the last time I woke up without an alarm or a headline waiting." "You won't find either of those here," he said. "Just coffee, pancakes, and a lot of noise." "Daddy makes the best pancakes in the world," Lily announced proudly, holding up a dripping fork. "They're even better than Grandma's, but don't tell her we said that." "I heard that," Jack said with mock sternness, earning giggles from both girls. I couldn't help but smile. "Well, I'd be honored to try the world's best pancakes." Jack gestured toward the chair. "Sit down before they eat everything. These two don't leave much for guests." I sat, still feeling slightly like an intruder in a world that seemed too good to touch. Lily immediately began explaining the rules of breakfast in the Morrison household, while Rose leaned close and whispered that she'd saved me the pancake with the lucky bubble in the center. It was ridiculous, endearing, and for the first time in years, I felt something unclench inside me. "So," Jack said, sliding a plate toward me, "what does someone like you do for work?" I froze for a second, caught mid-bite. The truth, I run a multi-billion-dollar investment firm currently under siege by corruption and betrayal. Wasn't exactly breakfast conversation. I took a sip of coffee to buy time. I manage people's money, help them make smart choices about it. "Like a banker?" Lily asked, her big eyes full of curiosity. "Sort of," I said with a small smile. "Just with more meetings and fewer cookies." She wrinkled her nose. "That sounds boring?" "It can be," I admitted, grateful for the escape her innocence offered. Jack didn't press, but I could feel his gaze linger on me. It wasn't judgmental. It was searching, observant. The kind of look from someone used to reading more from silence than from words. I busied myself cutting my pancake, trying to ignore the weight of that quiet scrutiny. He finally broke it with a soft chuckle. "You look more at ease this morning," he said. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here when I came downstairs." "Neither was I said honestly. "But your daughters have a way of making people feel anchored." "That they do," he said, pride lacing his voice. "They think the world runs on pancakes and stories." "Maybe it should," I murmured. For a moment, the only sound was the clatter of dishes and the girls' chatter. Jack moved with the easy rhythm of someone who knew this house like the back of his hand. Watching him, I realized there was something magnetic about the way he existed. Grounded, steady, like a man who had made peace with his past and learned to build something new from it. I envied that kind of strength. After breakfast, the twins ran off to get ready for school, leaving the two of us alone in the kitchen. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, but it hummed with something unspoken. "You really don't have to thank me for letting you stay," Jack said, rinsing the dishes. "Anyone would have done the same." "Not everyone would have brought a stranger into their home," I replied. "Especially not one with a wrecked car and no explanation." He shrugged. "You didn't look like trouble." "That's funny," I said softly, almost to myself. "Because trouble is exactly what I am." He turned then, wiping his hands on a towel, his eyes searching mine. "Do I need to be worried about that?" I hesitated. The smart answer was yes. The honest one was complicated. "No," I said finally. "Not unless you have a problem with secrets." He smiled faintly. "We all have a few of those." I looked down, tracing my fingers over the edge of my coffee cup. The truth was clawing at my throat, but I couldn't bring myself to speak it. Not yet. I wasn't ready to shatter the fragile peace that hung in the air. I was thinking, I said carefully, if it's not too much trouble, maybe I could stay here for a few days, just until I figure out what to do next. He studied me for a long moment. You have family you can call? Friends who might be worried about you? I laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. Family isn't really an option right now, and the kind of friends I have, they'd rather read about me than see me. Jack nodded slowly, like he understood more than I'd said. You can stay as long as you need. The phone company's supposed to fix our landline today, so you can call whoever you need. A flicker of panic rose in my chest. Actually, would it be okay if I stayed off the grid for a while? No calls, no contact. His brow furrowed. Off the grid? Are you in some kind of trouble? The words hung between us, and I could feel the question digging into me. For a second, I almost told him everything about the betrayal, the stolen money, the men who wanted me silenced. But fear strangled the words before they could leave my lips. It's complicated, I said finally. Most things worth doing are, he replied simply. There was no judgment in his voice, just quiet understanding. It disarmed me more than any interrogation could have. The screen door creaked open, and the twins came barreling back into the kitchen, arguing about whose turn it was to feed the horses. The tension dissolved as quickly as it had formed. I found myself smiling again, drawn back into their light. Jack grabbed his hat from the counter. I'll check the fences before the storm rolls back in. You'll be okay here? I nodded. More than okay. When he stepped out, I watched through the window as he crossed the yard, his silhouette framed against the wide Montana sky. There was something almost cinematic about him, a man carrying the weight of his world without complaint. I pressed my hand against the cool glass, feeling the faint tremor of the wind against my palm. For the first time since I'd left Chicago, I felt the dangerous pull of wanting to belong somewhere. As I turned away from the window, my eyes fell on the girls' drawings still pinned to the fridge. 2 little stick figures holding hands with a taller one. Me plus Rose plus Daddy. There was space beside them, an empty outline, unfinished. I swallowed hard, realizing how easily I could picture myself there. I picked up the coffee mug Jack had been drinking from and held it for a moment, tracing the warmth still lingering against the ceramic. A strange thought crossed my mind, that maybe this was what healing looked like. Not grand gestures or miracles, but mornings like this one. Ordinary. Honest. Alive. And yet, even as sunlight streamed through the window and laughter echoed down the hall, a shadow pressed against the back of my mind. The reminder that I didn't belong in this world of pancakes and innocence. That somewhere out there, my name was still on a list, my face still on a screen, and my enemies still searching. I closed my eyes, breathing in the smell of rain and coffee and quiet, holding on to it for as long as I could, because I knew peace never came without a price. Most things worth doing are complicated, and I was about to find out how complicated she really was. Behind her calm eyes, I saw a storm that had been raging for years. The day had stretched itself thin over the ranch, all golden light and the hum of summer insects. By late afternoon, the sky had softened to a dusty blue, and the heat had given way to a warm, lazy breeze. The twins were in the yard, their laughter carrying across the porch as they chased each other with wildflowers in their hands, their bare feet kicking up dust in the fading sunlight. I sat on the porch steps, glass of sweet tea sweating beside me, watching Jack hammer a loose board into the railing. He worked with steady, unhurried movements, his sleeves rolled up, sawdust clinging to his forearms. Emma sat nearby in the old wicker chair, her legs curled beneath her, her eyes following the twins with that distant, half-smile she often wore, the kind of expression that looked peaceful on the surface, but carried something heavy underneath. The wind toyed with a few loose strands of her auburn hair, brushing them across her cheek. And for the first time, I noticed how the sunlight caught in her eyes, green but darker than before, as if shadowed by things she wasn't ready to name. It had been 2 days since I found her by the highway, and though her physical wounds had started to heal, the invisible ones were still written all over her face. Every time a car passed on the distant road, her gaze flicked that way, her body tensing for a split second before she forced herself to relax. I set down the hammer, wiped my hands on a rag, and sat beside her. "You've been quiet today." She smiled faintly. "You mean quieter than usual?" "You're a tough read," I said. "Half the time I can't tell if you're lost in thought or planning your next escape route." Her smile faded, replaced by a look I couldn't quite interpret. Maybe both. The twins came racing up the porch steps, breathless and laughing. "Daddy, look!" Lily held out a clover chain, tangled but proud. "We made crowns." Emma laughed softly, and something in her voice changed. Lighter, freer. She bent down so they could place one on her head. "Now I'm officially your queen," she said, pretending to adjust her crooked crown. Rose tilted her head thoughtfully. "You don't look like a queen. You look like someone who forgot how to smile." "Rose," I warned gently, but Emma only reached out and touched the little girl's cheek. "You're not wrong," she said softly. The girls exchanged puzzled glances, but before they could ask, Emma gently sent them off again. "Go find some more flowers. Maybe we can make one for your daddy, too." When their laughter faded back into the yard, she leaned back in her chair and exhaled. "Kids see more than they should sometimes." "Yeah," I said. "They also forgive easier than most adults ever learn to." For a long time, we sat in silence, listening to the rhythmic creak of the porch swing and the low murmur of the wind through the fields. I wasn't sure why, but I felt it building. The sense that she wanted to tell me something that had been sitting in her chest for far too long. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but deliberate. "I was engaged once." I turned toward her. "Was?" She nodded. 3 years ago. His name was David. He was charming, smart, ambitious, the kind of man who knew how to make people feel small and important at the same time. We met when my company was expanding into real estate investments. He was everything I thought I needed: stability, partnership, a future. Her tone was steady, but her hands betrayed her, fingers twisting the edge of her sleeve like she was wringing out something she couldn't say aloud. "We were planning a wedding, a life," she continued. "But it turns out the only thing David was really building was a lie. He was stealing from the company, millions, quietly siphoned through shell accounts. I didn't see it until it was too late." The words hung in the air like smoke. "When I confronted him, he didn't deny it," she said, her eyes unfocused, as if watching it all unfold again. "He just smiled. Told me it wasn't theft, it was business. That everyone in power did it. That I was naive to think the world ran on integrity. And then he tried to turn it around on me. Said I was cold, controlling, too ambitious for my own good. That he'd done it all to protect me." Her voice cracked slightly on that last word, and I felt something twist inside me. "What did you do?" I asked quietly. "I turned him in," she said. "Every file, every account, every proof I could find, I handed it all to the FBI. The case made headlines for months. David was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison." I watched her carefully. "And that's when things started to fall apart." She nodded. "His family was powerful. Old money, old influence. They made sure I paid for what I'd done. Every deal I touched collapsed. Every partnership I trusted crumbled. Investors backed out, the board turned on me, and the media loved a good fall from grace. They painted me as the ruthless executive who'd sold out her fiancé for publicity. The woman who'd destroyed her own empire for revenge." She laughed bitterly. "They called me the Ice Queen of Chicago. I guess it was easier than calling me what I really was. Scared. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of the twins' laughter drifted in from the field, a sharp contrast to the heaviness that settled between us. "So that's why you didn't want the police," I said finally. "It's part of it," she admitted. "But it got worse." Her gaze dropped to her hands. "After David went to prison, I started digging deeper. I found out he wasn't working alone. Some of my own executives were involved, people I trusted, friends. It wasn't just theft anymore. It was a conspiracy. They were planning to take over the entire company, using my name, my connections, everything I built." I felt the words hit like a hammer. "Jesus!" "I tried to gather evidence quietly," she said, her voice trembling now. "But someone must have found out. My phone started acting strange. My emails disappeared. Then a week ago, my apartment was broken into. They didn't take anything, just moved things. Left a message that wasn't written but loud, enough to hear. And that's when you ran." She nodded slowly. "I packed what I could, drove through the night, and just kept going. I thought maybe if I got far enough away, I'd figure out my next move before they found me. But then the accident happened, and..." She gestured vaguely toward the field. "You know the rest." I sat there, trying to piece together the image of her life, the public glamour, the private ruin. It didn't fit neatly together. She wasn't the cold executive the papers had painted her to be. She was someone who'd chosen to do the right thing and been punished for it. "Why tell me all this?" I asked quietly. "Because I'm tired," she said simply. "Tired of pretending. Tired of running. And because you deserve to know what kind of danger you brought into your home." There was honesty in her voice. Not rehearsed, not calculated, just raw truth. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "If those people come looking, they'll find me between them and you." She looked at me sharply. "You don't even know me, Jack. You don't know what you're saying." "I know enough," I said. "You did the right thing. Sometimes that's the kind of sin the world doesn't forgive easily." She blinked hard, as if fighting tears. "You'll get hurt." "I've been hurt before," I said. "Doesn't mean I stop doing what's right." The porch fell silent, except for the soft hum of crickets. For a long moment, she just looked at me. Really looked. Like she was trying to memorize my face, or maybe to figure out why someone like me still believed in simple decency when her world had been built on betrayal. From the yard, the twins came running back, cheeks flushed, holding a handful of dandelions. Rose ran up first and threw her arms around Emma's waist. "You looked sad," she said. "Daddy says when your heart hurts, you need extra hugs." Emma froze, her eyes filling as she knelt down to return the hug. "Your daddy is very wise," she whispered, her voice thick. Lily joined in, wrapping her arms around them both. For a moment, the porch felt like the center of the world, the wind warm, the light soft, the kind of peace that sneaks up on you when you least expect it. When the girls ran back off toward the field, Emma stayed kneeling for a moment, staring after them. "I shouldn't be here," she said finally. "I'm putting all of you at risk." I shook my head. "You're not running anymore. Not alone." She looked up, meeting my eyes. "You can't promise that." I just did. For a long heartbeat, neither of us moved. The distance between us was filled with unspoken things, gratitude, fear, and something deeper neither of us wanted to name. The sun slipped lower, the light turning amber across the fields. Emma leaned back in the chair, exhaustion softening her features. But there was something else now, a hint of relief, of someone who had finally stopped holding her breath. I knew that whatever this was, whatever we had just stepped into, wasn't going to be easy. But when I looked at her sitting there, fragile and fierce all at once, I also knew I'd already made my choice. Some promises change everything the moment you make them. But some promises are tested the moment you make them. It started with thunder outside, and ended with thunder inside my chest. By evening, the storm had rolled in over the Montana plains, thick and restless, a curtain of gray swallowing the horizon. The wind howled across the open fields, rattling the windows and bending the tall wheat as lightning split the sky. Inside the farmhouse, though, there was warmth, the kind of warmth that only came from laughter, firelight, and the smell of dinner cooking on the stove. Jack had insisted on making something hearty to ride out the storm. "Weather like this calls for stew," he'd said, pulling vegetables from the pantry while Lily and Rose set the table with the kind of excitement only children could muster for an ordinary night. I moved around the kitchen, barefoot now, my borrowed flannel sleeves rolled up, helping where I could. I chopped carrots under Jack's quiet direction, stirred the pot when he stepped away to grab firewood. The simple rhythm of it felt almost sacred. For the first time in years, I wasn't a CEO, a fugitive, or a woman running from her past. I was just someone in a kitchen, part of something that felt real. The twins chattered endlessly, their voices rising above the rain that drummed on the roof. Rose told a story about a magic horse that could jump over rainbows, while Lily made exaggerated thunder noises for effect. I laughed, genuinely laughed, and the sound startled me. I couldn't remember the last time I'd done that. Dinner was chaos in the best way. The girls made silly faces at each other, Jack teased them about eating their vegetables, and I found myself smiling at him more than I should have. There was something about the way he moved around his daughters, patient, steady, strong, that made me ache. I'd met powerful men before, men with charm, money, authority, but none of them had what Jack Morrison did, the quiet kind of power that didn't need to be announced to be known. At one point, Rose leaned her head against my arm, her eyelids drooping from the long day. "Miss Emma," she murmured sleepily, "you should stay forever. Daddy says everyone needs a home." The words hit me like a soft punch. I smiled through the ache. "Your daddy is a very wise man," I whispered. Jack met my gaze across the table. For a second, the storm outside seemed to fade, leaving only the steady hum of something unspoken between us. Then thunder cracked, shaking the walls, and the moment broke like glass. "I'll check on the horses," Jack said, standing and pulling on his jacket. "They get nervous when it storms like this." "I can help," I started, but he shook his head. "Stay here. Keep the girls company." And just like that, he was gone, disappearing into the downpour, his silhouette swallowed by the rain. The girls helped me clear the table, their giggles bouncing around the kitchen as we raced to see who could stack dishes faster. When the power flickered, they squealed and clung to me. "It's just the storm," I reassured them, laughing. "It's nature showing off." A few minutes later, they snuggled on either side of me on the couch, wrapped in blankets as we watched a movie. Lily fell asleep first, her head heavy on my shoulder. Rose lasted only a few minutes longer before her breathing slowed, soft and even. I sat there for a long while, holding them close, listening to the rain beat against the roof, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Belonging. Then my phone buzzed. The sound was quiet, barely noticeable under the storm's roar, but it might as well have been an explosion. My heart lurched as I pulled the backup phone from my jacket pocket, the one I hadn't dared to touch since the day I arrived. The screen flickered to life, and a single message glared up at me. "Marcus. They found your car. FBI asking questions. Someone's been calling around pretending to be your family. Don't stay put. They're closing in." The room spun for a moment. My breath caught. My pulse pounded in my ears, matching the rhythm of the thunder outside. They'd found me. Everything I'd been running from, the lies, the betrayal, the danger. It was all catching up faster than I'd hoped. My first thought wasn't about myself. It was about Jack and the twins. I looked down at Lily and Rose, still asleep against me, their small hands clutching the edge of the blanket. The thought of those innocent faces being caught in the crossfire made my chest tighten painfully. I had to leave. Tonight. Quietly, I slipped out from beneath the blanket, careful not to wake them. I moved through the dimly lit house like a ghost, every step heavy with the weight of what I was about to do. In the kitchen, the fire had burned low. I grabbed a pad of paper and pen from the counter, the same one Jack used to jot down grocery lists and reminders. My hand trembled as I started to write. Jack, I don't have the words to thank you for what you've done. You and your daughters gave me something I thought I'd lost forever, a sense of home, even if just for a few days. But the truth is, the world I come from is dangerous, and it's closing in on me again. I can't risk letting it touch you or your girls. Please don't come after me. You deserve peace, not the chaos that follows me. Tell Lily and Rose that their kindness saved me in ways they'll never understand. I'll never forget this place. Or you. Emma. I folded the note and placed it on the kitchen table, the ink still wet. Then I went upstairs, my footsteps silent on the worn wood. The guest room looked exactly as I'd left it. Simple, comfortable, untouched. I packed the few things I'd borrowed. Jack's flannel, my phone, the little stone Rose had given me that first day. I hesitated, then slipped the stone into my pocket. For luck, I told myself. Or maybe for courage. Outside, the storm hadn't let up. The wind howled across the fields, bending the trees until they groaned. Lightning flashed, casting the ranch in brief, violent bursts of light. I stood by the window one last time, watching the outline of the barn in the distance. Jack was probably still inside, calming the horses, soaked to the bone, unaware that when he came back, I'd be gone. My throat burned. Every instinct screamed at me to stay, to believe that maybe, somehow, I could be safe here. But I'd learned the hard way that peace and safety were illusions. They always came with an expiration date. I slipped down the stairs, each creak of the wood sounding like a betrayal. The house was silent except for the ticking of the old clock and the soft snores of the twins from the living room. I paused there for a moment, watching them, memorizing their faces. "I'm sorry," I whispered. And then I opened the door. The wind hit me immediately, cold, wet, relentless. I pulled Jack's flannel tighter around me and stepped into the rain. The gravel crunched beneath my boots as I crossed the yard, the farmhouse fading behind me with each step. Every drop that hit my skin felt like the world urging me to go faster. I was halfway across the yard when the porch light flicked on. I froze. The light cut through the rain like a blade, illuminating the misty darkness. My breath caught in my throat. Then I heard it. That steady, unmistakable voice. "Going somewhere?" Jack's voice, low, calm, but threaded with something I'd never heard before. Hurt. I turned slowly, heart pounding, the rain plastering my hair to my face. He stood there on the porch, barefoot, jeans soaked, flannel shirt clinging to his frame. The light behind him cast his features in shadow, but his eyes were sharp, unyielding. In that single, breathless moment, I realized something I hadn't before, that running from the past was one thing. Running from someone who cared about you was another entirely. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I could do either. But before I could speak, before I could even breathe, he took a slow step forward, rain glistening on his skin like armor. "I asked you a question," he said quietly. "Going somewhere?" His voice carried through the storm, steady as thunder rolling through the valley, and it stopped me cold. Sometimes love doesn't ask for permission. It just refuses to let you go. The rain had turned to mist by the time Jack stepped off the porch, his boots sinking into the wet earth. The storm had passed, but its echo still lingered in the low rumble of thunder over the horizon. I stood frozen halfway across the yard, soaked to the skin, my heart pounding hard enough to drown out the world. "I asked you a question," he said again, his voice calm but edged with something I couldn't quite name, not anger, not disappointment, but something deeper. "Going somewhere?" I swallowed hard, the cold biting into me. "Jack, please," I began, my voice breaking. "You don't understand. I have to go. It's not safe for me to stay here, for any of you." He took another slow step forward, the porch light cutting across his face. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held mine with unwavering focus. "And you think walking into a storm alone in the middle of the night is safer?" "It's safer for you," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "They found my car, Jack. They're looking for me. If they trace me here—" "Then let them come," he interrupted, his tone steady, defiant. "Jack." "No," he said firmly, closing the distance between us. "I've spent the last 7 years protecting 2 little girls on my own. You really think I'm going to let you walk into danger when I can do something about it?" I stared at him, trembling, from the cold, from fear, from everything I hadn't said. "You don't get it," I whispered. "These people aren't just angry. They're dangerous. They've already killed to protect what they're hiding. If they find me, they won't stop until—" He reached out suddenly, his hand gripping my shoulders, grounding me. "Do you trust me?" The question sliced through the night, quiet but heavy. The rain dripped from the brim of his hat, his jaw set in determination. I hesitated. Trust had cost me everything once before: my company, my safety, my peace. But when I looked into his eyes, steady and unflinching even in the face of the unknown, the answer came from somewhere deeper than logic. "Yes," I said finally. "But this isn't about trust. It's about survival." "Then trust me to help you survive." I wanted to argue, to tell him that this wasn't his fight, that he didn't owe me anything. But the words caught in my throat. Because for the first time in years, someone was choosing to stand beside me. Not for profit, not for power, but simply because it was right. Behind us, the sound of an approaching engine broke the silence. My stomach dropped. Headlights cut through the fog, sweeping across the field before a dark pickup truck pulled into the driveway. "Jack," I breathed, panic rising again. "They found us." "Relax," he said quietly, not moving from where he stood. "That's Marcus." I froze. "What?" "Marcus Chen," he continued. "Head of security for Sterling Industries, right?" The truck door opened, and a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out, his movements precise and alert. Even in the half-light, I recognized him. The controlled posture, the scanning gaze. "Marcus," I whispered, relief and confusion flooding through me at once. "How—" "I called him," Jack said simply. I turned to him, shock wiping every other thought clean. "You what?" He met my stare without flinching. "You were planning to leave. I figured whoever's been protecting you might have a better idea of how to keep you alive. So I called him." "You went through my phone?" I demanded, half in disbelief, half in something dangerously close to awe. "It was on the counter," he said. "I took a chance. Good thing I did, because Marcus here tells me you've got a much bigger fight coming than a few bad men with deep pockets." Marcus approached, his sharp eyes sweeping over me first, then Jack. "Miss Sterling," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "I'm glad you're alive. You weren't supposed to go off the radar without backup." "Backup?" I said bitterly. "The last backup I trusted turned out to be on their payroll." "I'm not them," Marcus said firmly. "You pay me to protect you, and I intend to do that, even if it means working with—" His gaze shifted to Jack, assessing him. "A civilian." "Civilian?" Jack repeated with a faint smirk. "Last time I checked, protecting people didn't require a badge or a title, just a spine." The two men stared each other down, silent for a long beat. 2 protectors, 2 forces of will, each testing the other's mettle. Finally, Marcus nodded once. "Then we're on the same side." "Good," Jack said, "because I'm not letting her walk away again." I looked between them, the quiet rancher who'd saved me without question, and the man who'd been my unseen guardian for years. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. "You two don't even know what you're getting into," I said, shaking my head. "This isn't a movie, Jack. These people don't stop. They destroy." "Then we give them something to choke on," Jack said. "You said you have evidence, right? Proof of what they've done?" I nodded slowly. "Everything's in a safety deposit box in Denver. Files, recordings, everything I couldn't trust anyone else with." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. We get that evidence. We can end this. But we'll need to move fast. If they've already found your car, they're narrowing the search radius. You won't be safe here much longer. I turned toward Jack, my voice trembling. You can't come. You have the girls. My brother can watch them, he interrupted. He's good with kids. Besides, I'm not letting you do this alone. The finality in his tone left no room for argument. I felt something crack open inside me, the part that had built walls around every feeling, every vulnerability. Why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why are you doing this? He took a step closer, his eyes locked on mine. Because you showed up in my life bleeding and terrified. And somehow in 2 days, you reminded me what it feels like to care about someone again. You don't walk away from that. Not when it matters. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind moving through the trees. My throat tightened, and I forced myself to look away before the emotion could spill out. You're going to get hurt, I said. Maybe, he replied. But if I stay behind while you walk into this alone, I'll never forgive myself. Marcus glanced between us, his expression unreadable, though something in his eyes softened briefly. We'll leave at dawn, he said finally. I'll follow in a separate vehicle, less conspicuous that way. Jack nodded. We'll be ready. The tension slowly began to unwind, replaced by a fragile sense of purpose. A plan, however dangerous, was better than running blind. Emma, I sat down on the porch steps, my hands trembling as the weight of what was coming pressed down on me. The rain had eased, but the air still smelled of ozone and earth. I could hear the faint whinny of the horses in the barn, restless but safe. Jack crouched beside me, his voice soft now. You okay? I gave a small, humorless laugh. No, but maybe that's the point. I've been living in survival mode for so long that I forgot what it's like to have people who don't want something from me. He reached out, hesitated, then brushed a strand of wet hair from my face. Then get used to it, because from now on, you're not facing this alone. Marcus looked toward the horizon, his posture tense. We'll need supplies, untraceable phones, and enough fuel to get to Colorado without stopping. Once we have the evidence, I can leak it to the right people, the ones we can still trust. I stood, pulling the flannel tighter around me, my heartbeat steadying. And if we can't trust anyone? Jack's voice answered before Marcus could. Then we trust each other. Something inside me shifted then, a quiet surrender. Not to fear, but to faith. For the first time in years, I wasn't running toward escape. I was running toward something worth fighting for. The three of us stood there on the porch, the last remnants of the storm fading into the distance, a strange kind of calm settling over us. The air crackled with determination, heavy but clear. This was no longer about survival. It was about taking back what had been stolen, not just my company, but my freedom, my peace, my sense of who I was. And as the first thin streaks of dawn began to break across the sky, I realized something else. I wasn't afraid anymore. We weren't running anymore. We were going to war. Every mile we drove, the past caught up a little faster. The sun hadn't yet cleared the mountains when we pulled away from the ranch. The world was washed in pale light, the kind that makes everything feel suspended, quiet, fragile, unreal. Jack drove with both hands steady on, the wheel, eyes fixed on the winding road ahead. Behind us, Marcus followed in his black SUV, a shadow in the rearview mirror. The first hour passed in silence, the only sounds the hum of the engine and the soft hiss of tires on wet asphalt. I watched the horizon shift, mountains rising like sentinels on either side, snow still clinging to their peaks. Somewhere far behind those hills, Lily and Rose were probably just waking up, unaware that their father had left before dawn to help a woman who had brought danger to their doorstep. I wanted to tell Jack to turn back. Every part of me screamed that he didn't belong in this fight, that men like him didn't survive in the kind of world I came from. But when I glanced at him, I saw no hesitation, just resolve. that same quiet strength I'd seen when he pulled me from the wreckage. "You could still go home," I said finally, my voice barely audible over the rumble of the road. He didn't look at me. "And let you walk into this alone? Not happening. I'm not your responsibility, Jack." He smiled faintly. "Maybe not. But you're part of my story now. That's enough." His words hit harder than they should have. I turned toward the window, pretending to study the blur of pine trees rushing past. "You make it sound simple." "It is," he said. "Doing what's right doesn't need to be complicated." I let out a quiet laugh. "You'd last 5 minutes in my world before someone tried to twist those words into something they could sell." He glanced at me then, the corner of his mouth curving. "Then maybe your world needs more people who mean what they say." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full, heavy with all the things we weren't ready to name. Somewhere along the endless road between Montana and Colorado, something had shifted. The fear that had been sitting in my chest since the night of the accident was still there, but now it shared space with something else. Something dangerously close to hope. As the miles slipped away, I told him about the safety deposit box, how I'd hidden it under my grandmother's maiden name, Catherine Walsh, years ago, when I first suspected that someone inside my company was manipulating accounts. I told him how only 2 people had ever known about it, me and my lawyer, Patricia Hoffman. Jack frowned. "And you trust her?" "I used to," I said, my voice low. "She's been with my family since I was in college. She handled every contract, every merger, every crisis. But lately," I hesitated, the words catching. "She's been different, distant. I thought maybe it was stress, but now I'm not sure." Jack nodded slowly, processing. "So this Patricia might know where you hid the evidence." "Yes, which means if anyone's been leaking information about me, it probably started with her." He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his jaw hardening. "Then we'll be ready for her." Marcus's voice crackled through the walkie-talkie clipped to the dash. "We're about 30 miles out from Denver. Stay on Highway 285 until I give the word to exit. I've got eyes on everything up ahead. No tails so far." "Copy that," Jack said. I exhaled slowly. "He's good." Jack nodded. "He's loyal to you. That counts for a lot." "Loyalty gets people killed in my world," I murmured. He gave me a look that was both soft and fierce. "Then maybe you've been surrounded by the wrong kind of people." By the time the city came into view, afternoon light had turned the skyline to gold. Denver looked almost peaceful from a distance, the calm before the storm. But the moment we reached the outskirts, the tension inside the truck sharpened. Marcus took the lead, guiding us to a small boutique hotel tucked between high-rise buildings, discreet and unremarkable. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and rain-soaked pavement. Marcus booked 3 rooms under fake names, paying cash. No questions asked. We met in my suite afterward, maps and files spread across the table like a makeshift war room. "Tomorrow morning," Marcus said, pointing to a circled block on the map, "we go to First National Bank. Emma, you'll retrieve the safety deposit box. Jack, you'll stay outside as backup. Eyes on every exit. If anything feels off, you call it." Jack nodded, but I could see the flicker of unease in his eyes. "And if this Patricia shows up?" "Then we improvise," Marcus said grimly. As they talked strategy, I scrolled through the encrypted messages Marcus had pulled from a private channel used by Sterling Industries board members. Each line was a knife to the gut. Executives I'd worked beside for years, people who'd toasted my birthday, congratulated me on record profits, had been arrested that morning on embezzlement charges. All fabricated. Every name on the list was innocent. "They're using my evidence," I whispered, realization crashing down. "The files I gave the FBI to prove David's theft. They're twisting it, framing people who had nothing to do with it." Jack's eyes met mine. "So someone's not just trying to ruin your name. They're weaponizing it." Marcus nodded. "And whoever's doing it has access to your old case files, which means Patricia might not just be compromised. She could be orchestrating it." The words hit harder than I expected. Patricia Hoffman had been more than my lawyer. She'd been a mentor, a second mother. The thought that she might be behind all of this, that every secret I'd trusted her with was now in the hands of my enemies, made my chest tighten painfully. Jack reached across the table, his hand brushing mine, not as a comfort, but as an anchor. Then tomorrow, he said quietly, we stop running. We find the truth, whatever it costs. Outside, the city lights flickered to life, reflecting in the Sobitotsutam rain-streaked windows. For a fleeting moment, I let myself imagine that maybe, just maybe, we could win this. But as I lay awake that night, listening to the hum of the city beyond the glass, one thought wouldn't leave me. If Patricia knows about the box, then tomorrow isn't a rescue. It's a trap. I walked into that vault thinking I'd find the truth, but found my executioner instead. The morning air in Denver carried a strange stillness, the kind that comes before something breaks. The city hummed with ordinary life, cars in motion, coffee cups clinking. But for me, every sound felt sharpened, every movement suspicious. Marcus had drilled the plan into me over breakfast. Go in, get the contents of the safety deposit box, walk out like I belonged there. No hesitation. No emotion. Jack stayed outside across the street, parked in a construction truck we'd borrowed from one of Marcus's contacts. He was our lookout, the calm voice in my ear if things went wrong. I caught his reflection in the glass doors of the bank as Marcus and I stepped inside. Steady, watchful, ready. Remember, Marcus murmured as we crossed the marble floor. We're in and out in 15 minutes, no deviations. I nodded, clutching my grandmother's ruby ring, the key to the box, on the chain around my neck. My heart hammered as we passed a man reading a newspaper in the lobby, two tellers whispering near the counter. Nothing seemed out of place, but that was the problem. It was too perfect. The bank manager greeted us with a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Walsh, I believe you have an appointment to access your box? Yes, I said, forcing calm into my voice. Box number 2387. Right this way, he said, leading us toward the elevator that descended into the vault. Marcus's posture was all tension beside me, every step measured, every glance calculated. Something in his voice told me he felt it too, the quiet wrongness in the air. The elevator doors slid open, revealing the cold sterility of the vault level. Rows of metal drawers gleamed under fluorescent lights. The silence was suffocating. Marcus stayed near the entrance while I approached the box. My hands trembled slightly as I slid the ring's key into the lock. The mechanism clicked, releasing with a soft metallic sigh. Inside were hard drives, folders, and a small black notebook, the culmination of years of hidden truths. It's all here, I breathed, relief flooding through me. Every piece of it. Then we leave, Marcus said firmly. Now. But before we could move, the elevator doors opened again. And there she was. Patricia Hoffman stepped out, flanked by two men in dark suits with badges gleaming on their belts. My stomach dropped. Her face was pale, lined with something that looked like regret and fear tangled together. Emma? She said softly, voice trembling. I'm sorry. I froze. Patricia, what are you doing here? I tried to protect you, she whispered, taking a step closer. But they gave me no choice. The men behind her moved forward, one pulling handcuffs from his belt. Emma Sterling, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and racketeering. I stared at her in disbelief. What is this? Patricia, tell them the truth. Her eyes glistened. They're not real FBI, Emma. They're working for David's family, for the people funding everything. They said they'd kill my daughter if I didn't cooperate. It felt like the air had been punched out of me. My mind spun as one of the agents grabbed my arm. Please, Patricia whispered, her voice breaking. I had to make them believe I'd lead you here. I didn't know they'd— Now! Marcus barked, and everything erupted. He moved with precision, striking the nearest man before his hand touched his gun, slamming the other into the vault door with brutal efficiency. "Run!" he shouted, shoving me toward the back hallway. The elevator alarms blared. Over the comm, Jack's voice came through, sharp and urgent. "Diversion in 3, 2, 1. A deafening crash echoed above us, followed by shouts. Through the small security monitor by the vault entrance, I saw chaos unfolding outside. A construction truck smashed into a fire hydrant, water gushing across the street, drenching agents who were already rushing toward the bank. Jack had made his move. Marcus grabbed the evidence, shoving the contents into a waterproof briefcase he'd carried in. "This way!" We sprinted down the service corridor, alarms howling behind us, red lights flashing. My lungs burned, my heart hammering in rhythm with our footsteps. We burst through a maintenance door into the alley, where Jack's truck was waiting, engine roaring. Marcus shoved the briefcase into the back seat, and I climbed in, gasping for breath. Jack peeled away from the curb as shouts erupted behind us. "Hold on!" he yelled, swerving through traffic, cutting across side streets. The city blurred into streaks of wet pavement and flashing lights. In the back seat, Marcus checked the briefcase. "It's all here," he said between breaths. "We've got it." I stared out the window, my reflection fractured by raindrops. "Patricia's working for them," I whispered. "She's the leak. She's been the leak all along." Jack didn't say anything, but his grip on the wheel tightened. It took hours before we reached the safe house, a small cabin tucked deep in the Rockies, hidden among trees and mist. Marcus had prepared it days ago, stocked with supplies and satellite equipment. It was the kind of place built for disappearing. As we stepped inside, the quiet felt almost violent after the chaos we'd left behind. I sank into a chair, my body trembling, adrenaline still clawing at my veins. Jack lit the fireplace, his movements deliberate, grounding. Marcus set, the briefcase on the table. "This," he said, opening it, "is enough to bring down everyone involved, if we can get it out." I nodded numbly, staring into the flames. "They won't stop now. Patricia, they'll silence her next, and they'll come for us." Jack turned towards the window, his eyes narrowing. "They won't have to look far." I followed his gaze, and my blood ran cold. Outside the cabin, through the dark veil of rain and pine, faint headlights were winding slowly up the mountain road, and they were coming for us. The night the FBI came for us, even loyalty became a question mark. The first sign that we weren't alone came with the crunch of tires on gravel. The sound was soft at first, almost drowned out by the wind weaving through the pines. But Marcus heard it before any of us did. His hand went instantly to the pistol holstered at his side, his body tense, listening. Then came the lights, beams slicing through the mist, moving up the mountain road like a procession of ghosts. One set, then 3, then 5. "They found us," Marcus muttered. Jack rose from his chair by the fireplace, his expression shifting from concern to controlled fury. "How?" Marcus shook his head, checking the window. "Doesn't matter now. They're here." Outside, the low rumble of engines grew louder, echoing off the valley walls. Then came the command, a woman's voice through a loudspeaker, clear, firm, official. "Emma Sterling, this is Special Agent Sarah Chen with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have the cabin surrounded. Step outside with your hands visible." I froze. The name hit Marcus like a bullet. His hand dropped from his weapon, disbelief etching itself across his face. "Sarah," he whispered. Jack glanced at him sharply. "You know her?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "She's my sister." The silence in the cabin was instant and heavy. The crackle of the fire sounded impossibly loud. Jack looked between us. "Your sister's FBI?" "For 8 years," Marcus said, voice low. "But I swear to you I didn't tell her where we were. I didn't tell anyone." I stared at him, searching his face for any hint of deceit. "Marcus, if she's leading this, that means—" "I don't know what it means," he snapped, cutting me off. "But if they found us this fast, someone high up fed them our location." Outside, the voice came again, more insistent this time. Ms. Sterling, we know you have sensitive evidence related to the Sterling Industries investigation. Work with us, and we can guarantee your safety." "Guarantee?" Jack repeated bitterly. "They said that last time." Marcus turned to me, his eyes steady but conflicted. "You need to decide, Emma. Surrender or fight." My pulse hammered so hard it hurt. "If we fight, we're outgunned. If we surrender, we might be walking into a trap." Jack moved closer, his voice calm but resolute. "And if we run?" "They'll track us," Marcus said. "They've probably got drones in the air already." The walls seemed to close in, the weight of every decision pressing down like stone. I stared at the flickering fire, its glow catching on the briefcase of evidence that had already cost so much. "What if your sister isn't corrupt?" I asked quietly. "What if she's one of the few good ones?" Marcus hesitated, his voice breaking slightly when he finally spoke. "Then she's in more danger than any of us." Jack's gaze found mine, his expression unreadable. "Emma," he said softly, "whatever happens next, I'm with you. You don't face this alone." My throat tightened. "You have daughters waiting for you, Jack." "And they'll be safer if I do what's right," he replied without hesitation. "You told me once that peace never lasts. Maybe not. But doing nothing, that's worse." Outside, a second voice shouted orders, followed by the distinct click of safeties being disengaged. They were ready to move in. I took a breath so deep it hurt. "I'm going out there." Marcus's head snapped up. "Absolutely not." "If Sarah's really your sister," I said, "then she might be the only person left who can help us. But if she's not, then this ends here." Jack stepped in front of me. "Then we go together." "No," I said quickly. "You're not—" He cut me off. "You think I'm going to let you walk out there alone, after everything?" His voice was firm, his eyes locked on mine. "Not a chance." Marcus cursed under his breath, pacing. Then he stopped, looked between us, and nodded. "Fine. But I'm watching every trigger finger out there. The second anything looks wrong, we move." I nodded, the decision heavy but certain. When we stepped out into the cold night, the forest was alive with movement, flashlights cutting through fog, silhouettes in tactical gear forming a perimeter around the cabin. The air smelled of diesel and pine, and the metallic sting of tension. "Emma Sterling," the woman at the center called out again, stepping forward. Even from a distance, I could see the resemblance, the same sharp eyes, the same calm control as Marcus. "Are you injured?" "No," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "But before we do this, I need to know, are you here to arrest me or to hear the truth?" Sarah Chen studied me for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke, her voice low but clear. "The truth is, half the Denver field office has been compromised. I'm here because I've been investigating my own people, and nothing about your case makes sense." Marcus stepped forward slightly. "Sarah." She looked at him, a flicker of emotion crossing her face. "You vanished 3 days ago. I knew something was wrong. You'd never go dark unless someone forced you to." Relief warred with disbelief inside me. "You're not one of them?" I asked. "No," she said firmly. "And you're not the criminal they're painting you to be. But it's worse than you think." She pulled a folder from her jacket, holding it out. "Patricia Hoffman was found dead this afternoon. They made it look like a suicide, but the evidence says otherwise. She was killed because she was going to confess." The words hit me like a physical blow. The woman who'd betrayed me, who'd also tried to make it right in the end, was gone. I felt Jack's hand tighten gently on mine. Marcus turned away, swallowing hard. "Damn it," he muttered. Sarah's voice softened. "She left a message for you, Emma. Said she was sorry, and that she hoped you'd finish what she started." The night seemed to stretch endlessly around us. The pines whispered, the wind howled through the ravine, and for a brief second, none of us spoke. Marcus finally exhaled, the fire in his voice dimming to something quieter, heavier. "Then it's not just about survival anymore." Jack looked at him, then at me. "No," he said quietly. "It's about setting things right. Sarah nodded once, her eyes hard with determination. Then let's end this, together. And as we turned back toward the cabin, the briefcase of evidence glowing faintly in the firelight, I felt the weight of everything we'd lost, and everything still left to fight for. We weren't just fighting for freedom anymore. We were fighting for redemption. By noon, I was ready to trade my life for 2 little girls. The sky over Denver bled gray and gold when I walked into the FBI's temporary operations center. A quiet storm of determination, humming beneath the fluorescent lights. Sarah's team hadn't slept all night. They'd been working like people possessed, piecing together the puzzle that had cost lives, reputations, and peace. Every inch of the conference table was covered in evidence: hard drives, phone records, financial statements, and the briefcase that had nearly gotten us killed. The air smelled of burnt coffee and adrenaline. Sarah leaned over a laptop, her voice sharp. The enhanced audio identifies the second voice in Patricia's recordings, Deputy Director James Morrison. The name hit like a shockwave. Jack froze. Morrison? He repeated. You mean? Yes, Sarah confirmed grimly. Your surname's not a coincidence. He's your uncle. Jack's face went white. He's been the one running the Sterling investigation? And using it, Sarah added. He's been orchestrating the entire conspiracy from inside the Bureau. Every leak, every raid, every false arrest, all of it. Marcus exhaled slowly, anger burning under his calm. That's how they've stayed ahead of us. He's been pulling the strings the whole time. I felt cold spread through my chest. He's not just corrupt, he's the architect. Sarah nodded. We'll have one shot at this. The evidence we've gathered is airtight, but if we don't deliver it perfectly, he'll bury it. And us. Jack was silent for a long moment, his fists clenching at his sides. I'm done letting men like him destroy lives. Whatever it takes, we end this today. Before Sarah could respond, Jack's phone rang. The shrill sound sliced through the room like a blade. He glanced at the caller ID, and I saw the blood drain from his face. It's my brother, Tom. He answered on the first ring. Tom? The voice on the other end was tight, trembling. Jack, where the hell are you? Agents came to the ranch an hour ago. Said they were taking Lily and Rose into protective custody while you're being investigated for aiding a fugitive. Jack's voice broke. What? Tom, tell me you didn't... I tried to stop them, Tom said, panic rising. They had badges, paperwork, the whole thing. Said it was an emergency. They took the girls, Jack. I couldn't... The line went dead. Jack stood there, frozen, his hand still gripping the phone as if holding on to the last thread of sanity. They have my daughters, he whispered. The room spun. Marcus swore under his breath. Sarah's expression hardened, her agent instincts kicking in. Fake agents, Morrison's people. He's using the girls as leverage. Jack's voice cracked. If he hurts them, he won't, Sarah said quickly. He needs them alive to control us. I felt my chest tighten, the weight of guilt pressing down like stone. He took them because of me, I said quietly. This is my fault. Jack turned on me, eyes wild, grief turning to fury. Don't you dare say that! You didn't do this! But I knew the truth. If I hadn't shown up on his land, those 2 girls would still be safe in their beds. I'm turning myself in, I said, the decision forming before I could stop it. If I give Morrison what he wants, the evidence, the press coverage, me, maybe he'll let them go. Jack's hand slammed down on the table. No. It's the only way, I said, voice shaking. The hell it is, he shot back. You think I'm going to let you walk into that man's trap alone? Sarah stepped between us. She's right about one thing. He wants her alive. But if she walks in unprotected, we lose everything. Marcus nodded grimly. Then we don't let her walk in alone. We control the trap. The plan came together in fragments, fueled by desperation and precision. Sarah arranged a covert sting, authorized by a judge she trusted completely. Morrison thought he'd be pulling the strings, but by the time he realized the truth, it would be too late. The exchange was set for noon at his private ranch, isolated, secure, and perfect for a man who believed himself untouchable. When we arrived, the Colorado sun hung high and merciless in the sky. The air was thick with tension, the kind that tastes like metal. Jack's hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. Marcus trailed us in a separate vehicle, his eyes constantly scanning the ridges around the property. As we approached the main gate, Morrison was already waiting, standing on the porch in a tailored suit and the smug smile of a man who believed he'd already won. "Miss Sterling," he called out as I stepped forward, "you've caused me a great deal of trouble." "Where are the girls?" I demanded. "Safe," he said smoothly, "and they'll stay that way, as long as you give me what I want." "Which is?" "Control," he said simply. "You hand over the evidence, the recordings, everything, and you disappear. Do that, and everyone walks away alive." Jack's voice cut through the air, sharp and full of venom. "You think I'm giving you anything after what you've done to my family?" Morrison's smirk widened. "Your family, Jack, has always been useful to me. You were the quiet one, the good one. Your uncle taught you how the world really works. The strong win, and the rest survive on scraps." His arrogance made my stomach turn, but it also made him reckless. Sarah's voice crackled in my earpiece. "Keep him talking." So I did. "You built an empire on lies, Morrison. You used the FBI to destroy innocent lives. Patricia Hoffman died because of you." For the first time, his composure faltered. Patricia was weak. She knew the cost of betrayal. "Then so do you," Sarah said, stepping out from behind one of the SUVs, her badge glinting in the sunlight. "James Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, and kidnapping." The moment hung suspended. Then everything exploded. Agents swarmed the property, shouting commands. Morrison tried to run, but Marcus was faster, tackling him before he reached the door. Within minutes, it was over. Morrison was led away in cuffs, shouting threats that no one listened to. And then, through the chaos, I heard it. The sound of small feet pounding across gravel. "Daddy!" Lily and Rose came running from the barn, hair tangled, faces streaked with dirt, but eyes bright and alive. Jack dropped to his knees, gathering them both in his arms, his voice breaking with relief. I couldn't move. The sight of them, safe, laughing through tears, shattered something inside me. Jack looked up at me, his daughters clinging to his shoulders. "We did it," he said softly. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The wind carried the faint sound of sirens down the valley, the echo of justice finally catching up. Justice came in handcuffs, but love came running on little feet. After all the chaos, peace felt almost foreign, like learning how to breathe again. 6 months had passed since the day everything changed. Since the gunfire, the arrests, the noise, and the tears. And now, standing in the Morrison Ranch kitchen with flour on my hands and laughter in my ears, I realized I'd almost forgotten what silence felt like when it wasn't laced with fear. The twins were perched on their stools at the counter, faces smeared with cookie dough and determination. "Miss Emma, are you sure Daddy won't know about the surprise?" Rose asked, her blue eyes wide with conspiratorial excitement. I smiled, stirring the bowl of batter. "Only if we keep quiet, so no shouting when he walks in this time." Lily giggled, clapping her hands. "We didn't shout last time, we just screamed a little." Flour dusted the air as they burst into giggles again, their joy filling the space like sunlight through an open window. Outside, the fields swayed gently under the early evening breeze, the same golden stretch of land where I'd once stumbled into their lives. Broken, terrified, and bleeding. Now it was home. The sight of those endless Montana acres didn't make me think of escape anymore. It made me think of belonging. The kitchen smelled of sugar and vanilla, of warmth and memory. I looked around at the little things that had changed in half a year. The new curtains Lily and Rose had picked out, the family photos along the mantel, and one new picture in particular. The four of us, taken at the county fair, laughing so hard our faces were half blurred by motion. 6 months ago, I'd stood in a federal office, surrounded by evidence and fear, with no idea if any of us would survive what was coming. Now, the only thing I feared was burning the cookies. I pulled the tray from the oven, golden perfection steaming in the chill of the room. "All right," I said, setting them on the counter. "Birthday surprise complete." Rose leaned forward eagerly. "Do you think Daddy will cry this year?" I laughed. "Maybe a little." "He cries happy tears," Lily said matter-of-factly. "He says that's what happens when your heart gets too full." My chest tightened in that familiar, tender way it did whenever one of them said something wise beyond their years. They had Jack's honesty, that pure kind of goodness that couldn't be taught, only inherited. And as if their words had summoned him, the front door opened and Jack stepped in, brushing dust from his flannel shirt. The years had etched new lines into his face, but they weren't the tired kind anymore. They were the kind carved by laughter, by peace hard won. He looked up just as the girls shouted in unison, "Surprise! Happy birthday, Daddy!" Jack's grin spread slow and wide, his eyes lighting with the same warmth that had once stopped me cold in a storm. "What did I do to deserve this?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "You saved the world," Lily declared proudly. Rose nodded. "And you saved Miss Emma, too." Jack's eyes met mine over their heads, and for a moment neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. That single look held 6 months of unspoken gratitude, love, and the quiet miracle of surviving everything together. "Come here, you little conspirators," he said, scooping the girls up, one in each arm. They squealed with laughter as he spun them in a circle, their joy echoing through the house like music. When he finally set them down, they scrambled off to the porch to release the fireflies they'd caught earlier, leaving us alone in the soft, golden light of the kitchen. Jack moved closer, brushing a stray bit of flour from my cheek. "You know," he said, his voice low, "I used to think life couldn't surprise me anymore. Then you showed up bleeding on my fence line and turned my world upside down." I smiled, placing my hand over his. "You're welcome." He chuckled, shaking his head. "I should be thanking you. The girls adore you. The house, it feels alive again." He paused, eyes softening. "I feel alive again." There was no grand confession, no sweeping kiss like in the movies, just the kind of quiet truth that settles deep in the bones. I reached up, brushing my fingers along his jaw. "You gave me something I didn't know I was missing," I whispered. "A home that wasn't made of walls and glass and power, but of laughter, trust, and love." Outside, the girls chased fireflies across the yard, their laughter rising in bursts. The air was warm and sweet, the horizon painted in orange and violet. It was the same porch where Jack had once stopped me from walking away, where fear had turned into courage, and courage had turned into something greater. Now, standing there with him, I understood what had always been waiting to bloom beneath the chaos. Peace. Real peace. "Do you ever miss it?" Jack asked after a while, his arm slipping around my shoulders. "The boardrooms, the headlines, the power?" I leaned against him, watching the girls twirl in the last light of day. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But then I remember that empire cost me everything that mattered. And here, I've found what matters most." He kissed the top of my head gently. "You mean cookies and chaos?" I laughed. "Exactly." The sun dipped lower, the fields glowing like liquid gold. The twins' voices drifted through the twilight, calling for us to join them. Jack stood, offering me his hand. "Come on," he said. "They're waiting." I took his hand and stepped into the fading light, the porch creaking softly beneath our feet. Fireflies blinked in the dusk, tiny sparks against the growing dark, as if the universe itself was celebrating that we'd made it this far. As the four of us sat together, watching the stars blink awake over Montana, I thought back to the first day I'd seen this land, the wind whipping through the wheat, the ache of fear still in my bones. Back then, I'd been running from everything. Now, I was running toward something beautiful. Jack's arm tightened around me, the girls resting their heads in our laps, the night wrapping around us like a promise kept. For the first time, I wasn't Emma Sterling, the CEO, or the survivor, or the fugitive. I was just a woman in love, at home on a quiet ranch with the people who had become her world. And as the fireflies danced across the fields, their light flickering like tiny heartbeats, I smiled to myself and whispered into the night. I finally understood what it means to be truly rich. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit like. It tells me these stories mean something to you. Subscribe for more tales of love, loss, and second chances, and share this video with someone who still believes in hope after heartbreak.